On the show today, we have guest Richard Bernato. Richard Bernato has anchored a better than 50-year career in educational curriculum development and in leadership around the concept that the play is the thing, the simulation is the thing. His passions and interests are invested in catalyzing stakeholders to empower themselves, to empower others, to use a range of futuring and creative decision skills to create their preferred futures for the students whom they serve. Get ready for a great episode.
I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-created curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Dr. Bernato, welcome to the Time for Teachership podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet you and talk to you and have this conversation.
I'm so excited. And to talk about your book specifically, it is so cool. And it is very different from any book I've ever read. Very like video game-esque, and like the inner gamer in me was very excited about the kind of simulation piece here. So we're going to unpack all of those pieces today. But kind of at the top, I just want to know, what is important for listeners as they're engaging with this podcast episode to know either about you or just to kind of keep in mind about the things we'll talk about today? Anything up front you want to share?
And you only have a half hour.
Right.
If I have a chance to talk about myself, I could just go on and on and on. Well, I've been, obviously, just by looking at me, you can tell I've been around the block a few times. I have been in education, K through doctoral, for longer than you were alive, for sure. And, travel my way around. I was very fortunate early on when I came out of undergraduate school, again, before you were born, to be provoked by my first principal. I guess I was a seventh grade social studies teacher at the time, when he hated my first observation. And I was just thrown for a loop because I thought I was John Dewey incarnate. And here he was criticizing all these things that I had not done. And he said something to me I took to heart, and that was, Richie, kids this age learn best by doing. That had never occurred to me. I have to confess at the time. And I took it to heart on a number of different levels. And I really devoted my professional life to several things, but the first thing, I guess, because of his provocation, was to find anything that was creative to get students engaged, actively participating, to use an old-fashioned word, and to learn and discern things that aren't easily taught or have much more motivational value than not. And so I went along developing simulations and role plays and experiential approaches almost from the get-go, and accidentally discovered the provocative, catalytic nature of how it gets students of any age to truly decide things, evaluate, and transform. Now, I don't like the word transform because it's so overused, but it's a hard word to define. So what I try to do is to change it to a little bit of a phrase, and I call it new ways to realize. That's what transformation really is about. It's an alchemy, as we joked about before we got online, where you turn light into gold. And it's kind of marvelous to see it happen, certainly in the K-12 world, and to have fellow instructors, which is what I wound up becoming, was a coach, instructional coach. And then ultimately, I thought that it was probably best that I use an old-fashioned model to become a principal and an instructional coach and any number of administrative roles, where I finished up as a assistant superintendent for instruction, which was like the ideal job for a guy like me. And I was also lucky enough to be teaching methods courses in any number of local colleges. And that got me into getting leadership positions, as I said before. And it's been fun. It's been really a wonderful ride. And this particular book, Co-Creating the Future, has been a warning for some time in different aspects of it anyway. And I went up sitting down, I said, I'm going to make a simulation about leadership and about weaving skill sets that most leaders may have naturally because of whoever they may be and their own experiences, or may not be aware of in terms of the ability to enable fellow administrators, fellow leaders, or teachers, instruct the stakeholders to, and I use my favorite word here, to catalyze each other, to empower each other, to take charge of what I'm trying to remember who the author is. Sharma calls the emerging future. And, I was just talking to my class last week, one of my classes, and I said, and we were talking about decision making and about futuring. I have to come back to that word if you don't mind. And I said to them, I think it was the day before election day. And I said, you voted, or you're going to vote tomorrow. And what you're going to do is pick a candidate who's going to, you think, meet your preferable future. You're going to try to figure out what he or she stands for, and you're going to go from there. The choices they evidenced shows a preferable future that doesn't necessarily jibe with where I come from, but at least I helped them understand what it was they were trying to get to do. And it was something I said that I wanted to come back to. Oh yeah, and the word futuring weaves back in with simulation, which is where I didn't define simulation. I apologize. A simulation is a role play within a gaming world. We simulate all the time. In a sense, this podcast is a simulation. Certainly every video game anyone's ever played. I'm a terrible video game gamer, by the way, but I love to play them. You go into the cave to kill the dragon, and the dragon kills you. You go back and you do it again because you're not really hurt. And that's the beauty of a simulation. So when I gave students a chance to decide whether they wanted to fight World War I or not back in the day, I had one class say to me, he says, they were stupid to go to war. We're not going to war. So the world would have been different. And that's what simulation and gaming can do if you shape it correctly. And the word futuring begins to insert itself into, in fact, if you look at think tanks or read about corporate think tanks or governmental think tanks, they're futuring all day long. That's what they do. And business, corporate, as I said already, they do it all day long. They think about, this is a potential scenario, a potential future, a probable future. Is the probable future our preferable future? And if it isn't, what's the gap, and what do we do to either adopt the probable because it's unavoidable, or to change what we do to enable the preferable future? And futuring is really a word I made up. I think I made it up, and that would be it's a noun, it's a verb, it's a gerund, whatever that is, and essentially it's about careful forecasting. And so if I was just reading a paper a student sent me, was grading it, and it was a graduate class, and she says something about the fact that her school is going from a 789 to a 678. And clearly she saw all kinds of issues associated with it they hadn't planned for, they hadn't forecast for. And I said to her in a video last week, I said, well, whoa, I said, you're going to have a lot of cultural issues there because they're not looking at all of the potential impacts. An impact is something that you have to recognize. It's almost like a card game. If I have a pair of threes and I don't know what you have, it's likely you have better than my pair of threes. I'm talking too much.
No, this is great. Oh, I love all of the definitions too, because all of these kind of things are probably very different from the traditional way of not just teaching, but, PD for leaders, right? And thinking about how we do kind of training exercises or anything with leaders. So I just really appreciate that grounding in all of the definitions that people may not be familiar with. And actually, this idea of futuring connects perfectly to the question I was going to ask you next. So I usually ask about freedom dreaming, and Dr. Bettina Love talks about it as dreams grounded in the critique of injustice. And so I
Wow.
also love the kind of pairing with this idea of a preferable future, right? And so what is kind of either your freedom dream or your preferable future, or some amalgamation of both for kind of leadership education or supporting leaders to kind of do really, transformative, to not have a better word, work here.
Well, to come back, I need the name of that author you mentioned. I'm not familiar. I'd love to take a look at that myself. Um, my vision is to empower, is to use professional development and experiential approaches to enable uh, would-be leaders, teacher leaders, stakeholder leaders, and leader leaders to catalyze each other to recognize what their actual mission should be and their actual purposes should be, because too often we go off half-cocked, shooting our gun at the first solution we think is there, and then only to find out that we just twisted ourselves into another mess. And so the more nearly we can engage more people to empower each other, to listen to each other, dialogue with each other, to use the Senge word, Peter Senge, the more likely we'll be able to recognize what the icebergs are out there and recognize that what lies beneath the sea is what takes down the ship. And so we need to work to do that. I just read today, it's a little off the topic, but it kind of twists back to what you're talking about. I was reading a quick article this morning. It might have been out of Fast Company, I'm not sure. It said that DEI is dead. It said that it's old hat and corporations shouldn't even get involved with it anymore. And my soul twisted inside and out. I said, well, what does that mean? I don't know what it means. I think I can project that though, because it suggests a rock in the ripple in the pond whose ripple effects are preferable futures that scare me. What I have found in all the different kinds of instructional, experiential things I developed for students, younger kids, and for graduate classes in different ways, doctoral classes especially, is that many educators, whether they're teachers or lead or have stripes on their shoulder, are extremely passive. I haven't done any research to show that, but I would say that they just kind of feel victimized by whoever the decision makers are, and are perfectly willing to sit back and accept whatever they think the probable future is that they have to deal with, whether they particularly care for it or not. And it's kind of disheartening. I had a principal call me up last year. I had her in a class. She was in a Brooklyn charter school. I think it was a charter school. And she said that her superintendent or somebody had called her. It was a Monday. Had called her Sunday night and said, "You're going to have 17 new students in your building tomorrow." And these were all students who had migrated from Latin America, had various stages of preparation and so forth. And she said, "What do I do?" So my first question to her is, it says, your staff, have you built the capacity into your staff to future for these kinds of events? Because everyone knows these are the kinds of things that educators all around the country have grappled with. And she said, no. So I wanted to say, I didn't say I didn't want to hurt her feeling. I said, well, then you're getting what you kind of deserve in a sense that you didn't equip and create the capacity for your colleagues to prepare for that. Now, you get to these social justice premises, they're hard to deal with, even within the simulation, but they will occur in this simulation. Because what will happen is, when I get two groups together, they will often recognize demographic shifts as an issue. And what I try to do in the first state, the 7 phases in the simulation, is teach them how to truly information gather, not just assume that they know everything there is to be known, when in fact they haven't spoken to people. All they've read is achievement data. They haven't consider the environmental factors out there. By environmental, I mean the political and economic factors that are shaping so much of what we're grappling with now. And they don't do that. And that's one thing that the simulation will to teach them. And then there's this, I think I said earlier, there's sets of skills that aren't customarily taught in graduate classes, preparation or leadership classes of any, I don't think of any kind. One of them is creativity, creative problem solving, which is the only place you can really deal with the social justice and DEI needs. Because you're forced to grapple with these issues and look at them through a different lens. And they don't know, they only know the one lens. And so until you teach them how to use new lenses to see new futures, an array of new futures, it's very difficult for them to meet Einstein's definition of insanity, something like, I think he said it, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again that continues to fail is a definition of insanity. And we have this leadership insanity because we just continue to use the same worn out, inadequate solution approaches, often unilateral. And understandably unilateral in one sense, because some of these things come down and hit people between the eyes, like this poor principal, with no time to reflect or to engage her colleagues to work with, or her stakeholders to help her solve these things. But it's doable if they learn. And that's just one set of skills. I don't want to bore you with all of them straight away, but they're all in the book, actually, in various forms. And a couple of other books I've written as well. And I'm talking too much again.
No, this is great. So a couple things I wanted to flag. One, I usually ask a question about mindset shifts, and it sounds to me like there's kind of two mindset shifts necessary or kind of coming through your book. One is kind of, I'm thinking about that principal example, that there is so much benefit in futuring or engaging in the simulation, building capacity for these kind of, probable futures versus I'm just putting out the fires today. I'm just going to deal with what's urgent or in front of me now. And if we don't do the other things, then we're just going to keep having all the fires to put out, right? If we don't future.
Or like Peter Singer talks about the thumb in the dike, And what is the Las Vegas Vacation one with Chevy Chase, where he's exploring the Hoover Dam, I think, and he puts gum on one hole, and next thing you know, he's got 10 holes in the dike. That's how we operate. That's reactive rather than proactive. And you know what? There are, and in the business world, there are futures forecasting skills. So what I've done is I've only isolated about 4 because they can be kind of overwhelming. But there's so many out there. I'm going to recommend everybody check out a professor named Amy Weber. Is that it? Yeah, Amy Weber. She's out of NYU, who teaches teaches futuring courses, and I'd love to work for her. But she's written all sorts of books that not only go through technological changes, which is clearly obvious enough, but she also offers I don't know how many different kinds of futures forecasting skills. I only show 3 or 4, and I classify them as basically 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional. But only if the minute I begin to immerse folks in that, I just wish people could see what happens. Even when I do something as simple as the ripple effect, throw a rock in the middle of the pond, analogy I used before, or metaphor, I guess it is. Lights start to go on. They start to realize, well, if we didn't throw the rock in the pond, then that wouldn't happen. Or if we tried another pond, maybe we get a different result. It's because it's not the natural way we do that, except we naturally future. I mean, squirrels plant acorns. They're futuring. Farmers, turn their fields over for the next growing season. You decided to put your hair up today because you thought it would, whatever it is, the reason you thought that would, and it's fine. I can't put my hair up. And we try to decide whether our shoes match our clothes. That's all about future. Or we decide whether, we're going to go left or go right to is go someplace. It's a natural part of what we do, and we don't pay attention to how we can sharpen those futures forecasting skills within our own personal practices, let alone our own decision-making leadership practices.
Hi, this is Leah popping in to share the free resource for this episode, a free 20-minute conversation about how futuring meets your school district needs. You can find it at the blog post for this episode, www.lindsaybethlyons.com/218. Now back to
Kind
the
of
show.
those phases that you list out.
Okay.
Do you mind? Thank you.
Sure. No, I'm glad you asked. Thank you for asking. I actually wrote that down beforehand because I sometimes forget them myself. First of all, you have to. I always make the point again. A simulation is a role play, sets of role plays within a gaming situation. And again, if you think about Candyland, or if you think about the latest video game, they all really assume the same premise. There's always a scenario. And the more detailed the scenario is, the more information you have, or you can discover along the way, as you would with a video game. That's why I'm so bad at them. So I never know what the dragon is. The scenario has to be thoroughly understood within the simulation. I even leave room for people to use their own district or building scenario. If they wanted to do that, but I kind of always recommend that gets saved for after you finish the simulation, so you can take the skills from the simulation and then weave them back into your own problem-solving approaches. But you begin with the scenario, it's going to have economic issues, it's going to have demographic issues, commercial premises, value systems that have to be included. I provide a scenario in the book that's quite detailed. Thanks to my editor, she was terrific about that. There's a little map, and we have names of different places, and what's the rich part of town, which is the poor part of town, and whether the change is going on. So it's within the community, because that suggests too that when you try to change anything within school systems, I think that school systems sometimes don't pay attention to what I call the world out there. And so what I did was I created two teams. I created a world out there team and a educational leadership team. And they're not competing with each other. They're not they could be at odds with each other, but they're not trying to defeat each other. That's a different kind of simulation. In this simulation, it's really about how well they can collaborate, which requires a different skill set than trying to attack the Germans across the ditch, so to speak. And so what happens is, there's two teams, and they know their overall role, ROLE, and then within each team, forgive me, this gets a little didactic. The educational leadership team has at least 5 roles. It's always a superintendent. There's always a assistant superintendent, a pupil personnel director, a principal, and a teacher, who might often be the union leader, depending on how we shake that out. You can make more roles than that, but that's as simple as I can make it. And then the educational leadership team, the community world out there team, is always a board president. There's always a community leader, an economist / demographer, not a principal, a politician, and I'm leaving one person I can't remember. Now I'm going to leave it a little more complicated. Each role player has another role. So they play 2 roles. One is, for example, the superintendent plays the superintendent, but she also plays the culture specialist. The culture specialist on the other side would be the PTA president. I think that's how I set it up. So in other words, they have counterparts on each team, so that those skill sets, and then I provide material within the book to enable them to be very familiar with what their roles, what their skill sets should be, and how they have to play those roles. It's really it's a charge to see how they start to really play their roles. They really take their roles beautifully. I'm smiling because it's just fun to see how it works out. So once they've gotten their roles down and they've reviewed this scenario, you move to the second phase, which is to each group will then take a take response, and I put them in separate parts of a different classroom or two different rooms that don't even hear each other. So where each group identifies how they're going to gather information in order to really drill down, distill what their purpose is. That's hard. And then obviously they can't do a survey so I usually give them a survey result or something along those lines. But basically what I want them to do is use what they think the scenario information is to drill to a purpose. Now, you might be the world out there group, and I might be the educational leadership team, and you might generate with your group a purpose, and I might generate one, and it's probably not at odds with each other all that much, but there's usually fine issues among them. We do is we go back into another room and we exchange the points of the purposes, and they talk about it. Then I send them back into their old rooms, and then and I say to them, let's figure out a way to amend what we need to do if you think so. That takes a few minutes. And then I give influence cards to each group per role. The culture specialist always has more cards than everyone else because culture is the underlying answer to everything. Then I give them a break, and we go to a coffee machine or whatever we've set up for them, and they go there and they begin to negotiate with each other for the influence cards, to trade votes, trade premises. Then we go back and they vote. And then the vote will then dictate what the purpose is. And once the purpose is in the ground, then we move to the next phase, which is where I introduce futures wheels. And that's a ripple effect chart where they begin to identify what I call the 3 Ps: what's possible, what's probable, and what's preferable. Most anything is possible. But if we say, well, the demographics are going to change, all right, that's a possible and it's also a probable, all right? And then what's the ripple effect of the demographics changing? And what's the ripple of that? And then we go out a little bit, so they begin to project out future impacts. And then I say to them, okay, now figure out of the probables, which one you think is most preferable. So they kind of get to drill for that. They do the same process I explained before about voting on the purposes. And then we can move to another skill set, another two-dimensional skill set. It's called cross-impact matrix, which is a fancy word for a chart. And we say, well, okay, so Lindsay's group said that the demographics are changing and it's going to challenge us economically. Okay, who are the people, places, and things or ideas that will be affected by that? That's a probable future. And so they begin to project what they think the impacts will be on these other groups. And now they start to get deeper on these futures premises I've been talking about. They do the same thing. They exchange them to see which 3 of the ideas seem to be dominating the conversations. And you go to the next phase, which is the one I like the most. And it's hard to explain in a short time, but essentially what I do is I have them write scenarios and then enact them. So, for example, the book shows this better than I can do with my hands. I'm Italian, so I can do it with my hands. There's an axis that shows the up and down axis may say a high will to do things versus a low will. This axis, the horizontal axis, will show that they have the capabilities, the capacity, to use your word from before, and this group or slides down the other way. So if you think about it, now you have 4 quadrants: high low, high low low high. And then I put them in 4 groups and I say, okay, now create a website, create a newscast, create an obituary, an autopsy report, which you're going to present about that particular scenario. One where there's no resources and there's no will to change, as an example. What does that look like? Tell us a story about that. Typically, that's the most interesting one, because what happens is people will say, oh, this is really dismal and the world is over. And then they begin. But 10 years later, people begin to move in with the money to buy up these old dilapidated areas and so on, and rebuild the school. And the next thing you know, that's the place everybody wants to move to, because that's how they see the future outcomes evolving. So what happens is they present and again, they negotiate all these things. And then we vote on which we think is the most probable future. Not necessarily the most preferable, the most probable. And what happens then is one of those four will win. And here's what happens to it. Inevitably, the probable future will not be the one they want. This happens organically, which is great. I've never experienced where they say, okay, we're good with this scenario. So what happens is then we say, okay, well, what do we do? And that's where you just take the cork out of the bottle and they recreate a future with all the action, design, strategic planning approaches that everyone will have learned about from the planning person. And there's the new plan that they've made. Then what I do is in a simulation, I know I'm talking too long, but in a simulation, it's absolutely imperative that you have a debrief. It's sort of like taking people on a field trip and then coming back and never talking about it, because all these experiences can't even count the number of experiences and interactions that are going on. Now you have to debrief it so they can decide whether they want to adapt or transform. Unfortunately, I have to tell you, most of the groups I work with choose to adapt, don't choose to do any drastic transformation, which bothers me. I don't know why that. I think it's just because it's built into them. But then I have a plan. Now I turn around and say to them, now let's go back to your district. So tell me about your district and tell me how you would take this plan and apply these processes to your school district, or your church, whatever. I just use school as the backdrop, but it could be most any organization. I know I'm talking too much. I apologize.
No, that's a fantastic. I mean, you have to, because there's so much detail in the simulation. It's fantastic. I love that this is just out there in the world. And I think we talked about early on, your dream for maybe having a bunch of people doing this on Zoom from across the country. Do you want to kind of speak a little to that at this moment?
Yeah, my wife calls me a Disney idiot savant. And I know where every bathroom is in Disney World. I'm going to tell you all that, because Disney is the ultimate simulation if you think about Disney World. But at any rate, if I had some pixie dust, I would sprinkle it all around all the people who have read the book, and if I could get 10 people to volunteer, I would love. And this is going to be a little crude because I haven't tried this yet, but I would love to. I would love to see how this would work out. I would love to have, Lindsay say, okay, I'd like to be part of this, and Joe Smith and Mary Jones and so forth. And what we would do is I would set the simulation up cross country, and then we would interact exactly along the way of what we just talked about, how I described it, and see how a national or even an international group could walk through this simulation and see. Well, I can project, I can futures forecast and say, I think we would have some really marvelous ideas, and certainly what an understanding we could do. What a tipping point a critical mass of people could do to promulgate. That's a word I never use out loud. Promulgate this whole idea of simulations with futuring, with change, reform, and having new ways to realize what they can do for the future of how we school kids in the 21st century, accumulating set of challenges.
I bet that will be the group that finally chooses to transform and not just adapt to the.
I would give my house for that. I would just love to see that happen.
I love that. I think, I wanted to name too, one of the appendices that you have is really helpful, I think, for people who might be listening and thinking, I don't know if I have the time to do this with my staff, right? And so there's so much in there. People just need to get the book and read it, but there's so much in there about you could do this monthly. You could kind of set it up that way. You could do it online. I love that you just paid attention and gave so much real estate in the book to that reality.
It absolutely deserves that, because a yes but to simulation as a teaching instructional technique is that it takes time. And that's probably, I think, why a lot of K-12 teachers, if they're aware of what a simulation is, most are not. But what I found is that if a person, I use social studies as my example all the time, people may, a typical 8th grade social studies teacher teaching the American Revolution isn't spending 3 weeks on the American Revolution. I did because I just liked it. But, they may spend 3-4 days. And so if you want to get into something where the Tories and the Patriots and the British try to negotiate a treaty, that takes time. And unfortunately, the time is the coin of all teaching, someone once told me. And so they'll move off it. But and the same with PD for our teachers and administrators. And one way to handle it would be to do it in the way I described it in the appendix. I thought that was a helpful support for enabling people to use this book.
Absolutely. Well said. Yes. Okay. I have 3 more questions for you. They'll be
Please.
like a lightning round.
Go ahead.
All right. So this simulation is a big thing, right? People will need to get the book and kind of go through all of this. I'm wondering about one small next step that people could take after they listen today that could kind of launch them into either this way of thinking or practicing or thinking about PD. What's one thing people can do when they stop the episode?
Wow, good. It's a great question. One small thing would be, again, other than reading the book, would be to watch this podcast. That would be one thing that comes to mind. I guess maybe this is an unfair question that I might ask of other folks. And that would be, are you really satisfied with what you're doing? Because if you are, then we're going to go along to get along. But if you're not, this is a good set of answers for it, plural, for what you want to have happen.
I love that. Just ask yourself that question. That's beautiful. All right. One thing I ask for fun is something you've been learning about lately. This can totally relate to what we talk about in education, or it could be, I learned how to cook this dish or something. It could be anything.
I've discovered mysteries the past 6 months. I never read mysteries much. Because I can never figure out who did. I still can't. But I'm all of a sudden I'm reading Agatha Christie. I'm reading Connolly. I'm reading all these people, and I'm having a blast. I'm also always trying to lose weight and play golf. But really, the newest thing is besides hanging out with my grandsons when they're willing to be hung out with, is into mysteries.
That's phenomenal. I'm a huge mystery fan, so that's awesome. That resonates. And finally, where can listeners learn more about you or connect with you online? Obviously, we'll link to the book in the show notes, but where else can they find you?
Oh, my email is R Bernato, B as in boy, E R N as in Nancy, A T as in Thomas, O at gmail.com. I'd be thrilled to answer anything. You can find me. I don't have a website anymore. I did, but not anymore. I guess you could catch me through Solution Tree. Pretty sure you can, which is who's a publisher of this particular book and who has been really terrific and supportive of everything I've tried to do. And I'm all over. If you Google me, I have like 10 different. There's all different things about me, different places. But
awesome. Thank you.
I'm very appreciative of the chance for you to smile at me and to be interested in what I'm saying.
Oh my gosh, it's a fascinating concept. I'm really excited. I can't wait till we get that critical mass of people internationally playing this. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, volunteer.
That's great. Let us know.
I think I have 2 people now who want to do it, and I just I don't promise anybody that it will be a smooth sail. But I think that we could learn a lot from about each other and about ourselves, as well as what the whole idea of reform actually really means.
Absolutely. Dr. Bernato, thank you so much for your time.
I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate the chance to contribute to your mission, which I totally applaud and admire, and wish there were I could help you more on that count. If you can think of a way for me to do that, I'll write a simulation about that, whatever you want me to do. Or we write one together. We can have some fun with that.
All right, let's do it. If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsaybethlyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.